You're listening to the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and on today's episode, we have UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Gastelum preview, predictions, and analysis, with the main event of the evening between top 10 ranked middleweight contenders, the number 3 ranked Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier, former heavyweight and light heavyweight, finally finding his home in the middleweight division, going up against the former title challenger, former number 1 contender, coming off a loss to Robert Whittaker, the number 9 ranked Kelvin Gastelum. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. Hey everybody. All right, guys, how's everybody doing tonight? I'm just going to get these predictions out to you. UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Gastelum. It takes place tomorrow night, August 21st. I believe it's from the UFC Apex, if I am correct. Yes, at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. The main event, a really, really solid fight in the middleweight division. Both men coming off losses to the current number 1 contender, Robert the Reaper Whittaker, in their last fights. Cannoniers coming at UFC 254, and Kelvin Gastelum's coming in October. Or no, his loss was in, hold on. Let's see. When was Kelvin in Rob? It was recent. Was it in June? Hold on here. Let's see. It might have been July 17th. Let me see. It was in April. I was off on the dates. So April 17th. Whittaker defeated Gastelum via unanimous decision. I think it was 49-46, 4 rounds to 1. And, they had a great fight, a really solid contest. Whittaker pretty much beat Gastelum to the punch on every exchange. I would say that the Cannonier fight was a little bit closer than the Gastelum and Whittaker fight. Whittaker just was a little bit ahead of everything Gastelum was trying to do. He was cutting him off on angles. He was constantly landing that check left hook, the jab into the left hook, the 1-2 into the right high kick behind the right hand. But we'll get into that when we obviously get to the main event. But we're going to start off in the prelims, or on the prelims in the 170-pound UFC welterweight division in a fight between Sasha Palatnikov, who comes into this fight with a record of 6 victories and 3 defeats, going up against Fortis MMA's Ramiz Brahimaj, who comes into this fight with a record of 8 victories and 3 defeats. This is a really solid contest. Palatnikov had that really, really impressive performance against Louis Cosi. Was losing the fight, got dropped multiple times in the first round, and then came back, weathered the storm, and eventually got the TKO finish over him. Palatnikov is a guy who likes to fight a little bit recklessly, but he's got very good movement, good angles to his left and to his right, good lateral movement, good ability to cut, slip and pivot and get out of the way if you are to push him up against the cage. He is a little reckless in his combinations. Sometimes you'll see him kind of step forward and overextend on his right hand, overextend on his jab. Sometimes he'll just throw a kick and then just kind of get crowded up with the opponent to the point where he has to push off and get back to the center, or push off to create a little bit of space. And that's something he definitely doesn't want to do against a Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist like Ramiz Brahimaj. Now, Sasha Palatnikov, in his last fight, he got submitted by, what's the guy's name? God, these names are throwing me off. I believe it was, let's see. Who did he just get submitted by? Here we go. Let's see. I can't think of the guy's name. That's right. Impa Kasanganay. So he got submitted by Impa Kasanganay in the second round. They got caught in a scramble. Impa was able to take his back, kind of lock in almost like a bulldog choke, rear naked choke. And he locked it in, a rear naked choke, without putting his hooks in, and squeezed and got the submission. He was able to out-grapple Palatnikov. That's something that Palatnikov has a little bit of trouble with, is if you're able to get in on his hips, he is a little bit easy to take down in his career. He is good at getting up to his feet, whether it's getting up to a hip, getting up to an elbow, creating the space and then turning off the cage, or, shrimping his hips out, getting back up to a base, and then obviously circling and getting back to the center and then working his striking. The best weapon for a guy like Sasha Palatnikov is going to be his boxing, his straight punches, the 1-2s, the 1-1-2s, following it up with kicks behind the punches, and just overwhelming the opponent with volume and just, I don't want to call it pity pat shots because it's not, but the straight punches and just the overall volume of a guy like Sasha Palatnikov is something he's going to want to use to try to overwhelm a guy like Ramiz. Ramiz is good on the feet. He's got good lateral movement, good in and out movement, good hooks to get like a check hook versus an opposite stance opponent, good kicks, but his main bread and butter in this MMA game is his grappling. If you look at his last few fights, we can pull it up before he got into the UFC. I believe all of his victories had come via submission. Let me see. Got him right here. Ramiz Brahimaj, he's 8-3, like we said. And his last, obviously, he lost his last fight to Max Griffin. That was a brutal way to lose the fight with an elbow over the top in the clinch. Just basically ripped his ear almost all the way off his head. Before that, it was a arm triangle submission over Carlos Martinez at LFA 62 in the first round. Before that, he lost a decision to Justin Patterson. Prior to that, he won via a guillotine choke in the second round over William Macario at LFA 47. Prior to that, he lost to Evan Cutts via decision at LFA 40. Before that, it was a win via first round submission, first round rear naked choke over Bilal Williams. Before that, a first round guillotine choke at 36 seconds of the first round over Ben Simmons. Prior to that, Josh Sturgill, a win via guillotine choke in the first round at 24 seconds. Before that, a win in the first round via rear naked choke in 55 seconds. Prior to that, a Kimura in the first round in 20 seconds. And then his first professional fight was a win via rear naked choke at 2:17 of the first round. So this guy's wins are going to come by submission. He's going to look to take you down. He's going to look to get to the clinch, work some trips, end up in the top position, and then work for submissions, work to maintain that top position. He's going to look to make you want to shoot on the feet, maybe land some good punches and some good round kicks to make you want to catch the kick and shoot in, so that if you shoot ahead on the outside single, he can grab your neck and lock it up and get the submission. With Palatnikov, he's got the pressure. He's got the forward pressure and the movement. He's a little reckless in overextension of his punches and just kind of crowding himself and not allowing himself to get the adequate space to work his combinations. But once he lets those 1-2s fly, the 1-1-2, the 1-2-1, the 1-2-3 followed by the round kick, just the straight punches, the jabs and the crosses are going to be the weapons for Sasha Palatnikov. And he's going to want to make this a dirty fight, get up against the cage. If he's ever in a clinch position, he's going to want to make sure that he is pushing Brahimaj up against the cage in the over-unders, working elbows, working knees. He's got really, really solid elbows from the clinch. That's something I think he's going to want to work against a guy like Ramiz, because we saw in his last fight against Griffin, obviously an elbow is what led to the end of that fight. It was an injury, but it was caused via an elbow. Overall, I think that just based off of Palatnikov's last fight against Impa Kasanganay, and the problems he had with the striking and the grappling of Luis Kosei before he obviously, got everything going for him in that fight and eventually ended up finishing him, I think that the forward pressure, the cardio of Ramiz is going to just tire out Palatnikov. I think he's going to overextend on one of his punches. Like we already said, he does tend to do overextend or get out of position. It's going to lead him to get taken down. I think Palatnikov's going to give up his back. Ramiz is going to take the back, lock in the rear naked choke, and get the submission. I think it's going to go to the second round. I think that Palatnikov is going to be able to last in that first round, stay patient on the ground, just protect his neck, make sure his elbows are in, and, if he is on his back, if he does have Ramiz on his back with the hooks in, he's going to want to get one of those hooks out and then sink that hip down to the ground and turn into Ramiz. But overall, I think that Palatnikov's just going to end up giving up his back in a scramble. Ramiz is going to get those hooks in and get the submission in the second round. After a pretty dominant first round, I think it'll be close for the first 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. But after that, I think that Ramiz is going to find a way to get the takedown and work his top pressure and his ground and pound, and then that'll set up the submission in the second round. If it goes past the halfway point in the second round and into the third round, I do expect Palatnikov to up the volume, up the pressure, push the opponent back, push Ramiz back, work those 1-2s, work those kicks to the body, pop, 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 slipping, angling, boom, 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 boom. And then I think that the volume of Palatnikov can overwhelm Ramiz in the later rounds, in the third round, at the end of the second round. So if it goes past the halfway point in the second round, I would lean heavily towards Palatnikov, but I just think he's a little bit too reckless and not as good of a defensive guy, a defensive fighter on the ground in the jiu-jitsu game, and he's going to leave his neck open and get submitted. So my pick is Ramiz Brahimaj to defeat Sasha Palatnikov via a second round rear naked choke. Up next on the main card, well, we only did one prelim, but we're going to the main card. In the flyweight division, you've got the number 3 ranked Alexandre the Cannibal Pantoja coming into this fight with a phenomenal record of 23 victories and 5 defeats, going up against the number 6 ranked Brandon Raw Dog Royval, who comes into this fight with a record of 12 victories and 5 defeats. This is a great fight. I do not know why this is opening up the main card. This should be your co-main event. Clay Guida versus Marco Madsen should be opening up this main card, but obviously that's not what happened. Pantoja versus Royval, number 3 versus number 6. Why this isn't the co-main event, I don't understand. It seems like a lot of fans in the mixed martial arts community don't seem to understand that either. But, it is what it is, and that's just how it goes sometimes. But either way, we're getting the fight, and what a banger to open up the main card. Pantoja obviously was on that first season of The Ultimate Fighter with the flyweights who were trying to find the challenger to battle Demetrius Johnson, Mighty Mouse, when he was the flyweight champion and the dominant flyweight champion in the UFC. The winner of that season ended up being Tim Elliott, but Pantoja got all the way to the finals. It was either the finals or the semifinals. I believe he did get to the finals, though, and he ended up losing via submission to Tim Elliott, and that was somebody I don't think a lot of people expected to win that season of Tough, and he gave Demetrius Johnson one of his toughest fights in his career, obviously, aside from Henry Cejudo and the first fight against John the Magician Dotson. But when it comes to this fight, Pantoja is a very, very decorated Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist. He's a very good grappler. You do not want to give this guy your back. If you give up your back and he gets his hooks in, it's only a matter of time before he finds a path to grab a hold of your neck and have you tapping and, submit you. He's very good on the ground, good grappling, good ability to transition, move, flow pretty well on the ground as well. You do not want to give your neck up because Pantoja will grab it and he will take it home for dinner. When you look at a guy like Brandon Royval, he fights under head coach Mark Montoya out of Factory X. And Royval is just kind of this, he reminds me a little bit of like a more technical version of a Tim Elliott. He fights out of southpaw. He kind of fights in that side stance. He uses a lot of hip bumps, a lot of movement. He'll use that check right hook to come over the top. Sometimes it'll have some power behind it. Sometimes it's just used to get you to throw something and, come into his guard or get you to like overextend or close the distance, and then he can try to grab a hold of your neck, lock up a submission. Royval's just a tricky guy. They don't call him Raw Dog for no reason, man. This guy's a dog. He comes into every fight to put on a show. And he lost that fight against Brandon Moreno. Obviously, that was an unfortunate way to end the fight. Got slammed in a takedown, and his shoulder separated. He dislocated his shoulder, and the fight got stopped via TKO for who is the current flyweight champion in Brandon Moreno. Prior to that, he was on a 2-fight win streak in the UFC, came into the UFC with a submission victory over Tim Elliott in his first fight, and then in the second fight in the UFC, a back-and-forth barn burner, I believe it was at UFC 253, against Kaikar France, where he got that win via a second-round arm-in guillotine choke, I believe. It was either arm-in or a regular guillotine, but he ended up locking like a reverse body triangle, figure forward his legs, got the guillotine choke after Kaikar France left his neck out, and got the submission. Prior to that submission, I believe he did get dropped with a knee up the middle, which is something that Pantoja is going to have to look out for. Pantoja does throw good volume. But sometimes it's just 1 or 2 shots, and then every once in a while he'll throw a 3-punch combo. He's not the cleanest striker. I'm not going to sit here and say that Pantoja has clean technical, like he looks like a seasoned kickboxer on the feet. He doesn't. He does overextend. He does throw wild combinations, kind of like Matt Schnell. Obviously, he's a little bit cleaner than Matt Schnell, and that's what led to that overhand right as Schnell went to the body, dropped him, and got the knockout victory over Matt Danger Schnell. But Pantoja is a patient guy. He will wait a little bit, and then every once in a while he'll explode. He'll wait for you to come in, throw a front kick to the body, throw a teep, throw a boom, 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 1-2-3 combination, 2-3-2, 2-5-2, pop, 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 pop. He'll overextend a little bit on his punches, and mainly he's looking to get you to the ground, but he doesn't have a problem standing on the feet. Against a guy like Royval, let's look at his overall mixed martial arts record. We can pull it up right here. We already said he's 12-5 overall as a professional mixed martial artist, but let's just look at the way some of his fights have gone. Here we go. So he lost to Brandon Moreno via that shoulder injury at the end of the first round. That was at UFC 255. He won via second-round guillotine choke over Kai Kara-France, which we just discussed. Before, he was in a fight that got canceled against Jerome Rivera. And then prior to that, it was a second-round arm triangle submission over Tim Elliott, former flyweight title challenger, in his UFC debut. Before that, it was a first-round armbar over Nate Williams. And then 2 canceled fights, one against Jerome Rivera, once against Jared Scoggins. Before that, it was an armbar in the first round over Joby Sanchez. Prior to that, it was a loss to Casey Kenny, who is currently in the UFC, fights at 135. Just had a very, very close fight against, I can't think of the guy's name. He just lost to the guy in a very, I thought it was a pretty close fight, but I know a lot of people gave it to his opponent. Who was that here? Song Yadong. That was it. Okay, so he just lost via decision to Song Yadong at UFC 265. Before that, Royval had a decision victory over Charles Johnson. Before that, he had a win via a freak injury over Jerome Rivera. And then prior to that, it was a victory via triangle choke in the second round over Demetrius Wilson. I mean, if you just go down the guy's record, he is a phenomenally decorated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist, and it really, really translates well to the mixed martial arts game. And I know Pantoja, you don't want to give up your back against Pantoja. You don't want to end up on the ground with Pantoja, but I have a feeling that Royval is going to want to go to the ground. He's going to want to test his jiu-jitsu against a guy like Alexandre Pantoja. And if you look at Pantoja's last few fights, we can pull them up right here. Looking at Pantoja's last few fights, he had that victory over Manel Kape via decision. You saw how good Manel Kape just looked in his last fight with that flying knee knockout over Ode Osborne. Before that, he had a canceled fight against Manel Kape. Prior to that, he had a loss to Askar Askarov via decision, who was primarily a heavy grappler. He had a win via knockout over Matt Schnell. He had a loss to Davison Figueiredo, where he just got dominated basically by Davison, the former flyweight champion, the God of War. That was at UFC 240. Prior to that, a win in the first round via KO over Wilson Hayes. Before that, it was a win via first round submission, a rear naked choke over Ulka Sasaki. Prior to that, a win via decision over the current flyweight champion in Brandon Moreno. So looking at both guys' records, one has a win over Brandon Moreno, one has a loss due to a freak injury via TKO to the current flyweight champion. Prior to that, a loss to Dustin Ortiz via decision. Prior to that, a rear naked choke in the third round over Neil Siri. Prior to that, a split decision win over Eric Shelton. And then his other fights were in the house on the Ultimate Fighter. He lost to Hiromasa Okikubo. And then prior to that, he beat Kai Kara-France via decision. And then he also defeated Brandon Moreno on the Ultimate Fighter and via second round rear naked choke. But Moreno is a different fighter, and I don't know if that fight would go close to how it went then now. So overall, here's how I see it going. I think that Royval has almost a perfect style to give Pantoja a lot of trouble. Just the constant movement, the hip bumps, the knees up the middle, because you know Pantoja is going to be looking to close the distance and shoot those takedowns or get into a clinch position. If he times it, lands a good shot on the feet, boom, steps in, lands a knee to the chin. of Alexandre Pantoja as he changes levels, it can cause a lot of trouble for him. He landed him against Kai Kara-France, landed a knee up the middle. He lands good kicks, good punches overall, but his bread and butter is in the jiu-jitsu. Both of these guys are very, very decorated in the jiu-jitsu game. I think the volume of Brandon Royval and just his overall, not giving a shit attitude is going to cause a lot of trouble for a guy who's as clean, or I wouldn't say as clean, but as technical and as patient at certain points as Pantoja. And when he decides to not be patient and maybe he goes in with a combination, a 2-5-2, a 1-2-3, maybe when he goes in for that combination, that's going to leave open the knees to the body, the knees to the head, the 1-2, the check hook, the round kick, switching stances, left hands, right hooks, constant movement, and just overall, Brandon Raw Dog Royval is a very, very hard puzzle to solve. And I think he's going to give Pantoja a lot of problems. I think the grappling is going to be very interesting. I think the movement of Royval might leave his back open to get taken by Pantoja and get submitted, but I think he's good enough defensively as a jiu-jitsu artist to defend the submissions of Pantoja. I think he's good enough to threaten with his own submissions, which is going to make Pantoja a little bit hesitant to threaten with his own submission game. So overall, I'm going with the underdog here. I'm going with Brandon Raw Dog Royval to get the victory over the number 3 ranked Alexandre the Cannibal Pantoja. Number 6 getting the victory over number 3. I think it's going to be via unanimous decision. I think the first round's very close, but I think Royval's volume, his activity, his knees, his overall just really creative game and wild game is going to give Pantoja a lot of trouble. And I think he's going to win 2 out of the 3 rounds, get a 29-28 unanimous decision over Alexandre Pantoja. I could see him locking up a submission if Pantoja gets hurt by a knee. Maybe he leaves his neck out there and he jumps on the neck and gets the submission. But I'm going to go with the decision to, play it safe. I'm not 100% confident in him getting a submission, but I am going to go with the plus 150 underdog and the number 6 ranked Brandon Royval to vault his way up those flyweight rankings. All right, up next, we got a battle in the lightweight division at 155 pounds between Vince from Hell Pichel, who comes into this fight with a record of 13 victories and 2 defeats, going up against Austin Thud Hubbard, who comes into this fight with a record of 13 victories and 5 defeats. I mean, when it comes down to it, here's what I think. Pichel is a guy who can go a hard 3 rounds, a grueling 15 minutes, and not tire out. And, I mean, Austin Hubbard can do that as well. But we've seen that Austin Hubbard has had a little bit of trouble with somebody who's got good grappling, good wrestling, and good top control and good top pressure. I mean, you look at the fight against Marco Madsen for Austin Hubbard. He was constantly getting taken down. He did get back up to his feet. He would get taken down and controlled every time he got back up, which Marco Madsen's an Olympian, a silver medalist in the Olympics in wrestling. But I believe it's Greco-Roman wrestling. I could be wrong. You can correct me. But the thing is, he has shown the tendency to get taken down in his fights. He will get taken down. He will get controlled. Pichel had a little bit of trouble with that against Jim Miller in the first round. But the longer the fight went, he was able to use his top heavy pressure and his strength and his power to fight out of a lot of the submission attempts of a Jim Miller, to maintain that top pressure and top position. To land some heavy, heavy ground and pound shots. That's something I think Hubbard has to watch out for. Pichel, when he gets on top, he's got heavy ground and pound. Lands those straight punches from a short distance, just boom, 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 boom. He's got good punches. He's got good ability to maintain top position. He's good if he's in the defensive on the ground at being able to fend off submissions, fend off positions, and work his way into a favorable position on the ground or work his way back up to the feet. On the feet, I think that Hubbard probably is the more technical striker. He's a little bit more creative. He uses a lot of angles, a lot of head movement, some fakes and feints. He does have a little bit more that you have to look out for. But when it comes to the straight shots, when it comes to, being more economical with your shots and your shot selection and, probably being the more accurate guy, you're going to give that to Vince from Hell Pichel. He's got good straight punches, good knees, good body kicks. He really moves around very well. Good angles. He's got good eyes in there. Pop, 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 pop. he can land good straight shots, and he also can get into that over-under and that clinch up against the cage, the over-unders, the double-unders, and make it a dirty, grueling fight, and he can keep that pace up for 15 minutes. We've seen that Austin Hubbard can get taken down multiple times, and find a way to stay in the fight like he did against Marco Madsen. He lost the first 2 rounds clearly and then came back and could have finished Marco Madsen just because of how tired he was, but ended up winning that 3rd round after getting dominated. So we know that Hubbard's going to stay in there. He's going to stay in there. He's going to keep it up. He's going to keep moving forward and try to win the fight, which is good. But against a guy like Pichel, who can keep up that same pace, who can use the grappling, who can use the over-under in the clinch position, who can, is overall just a cleaner, more technical, seasoned striker, I think Pichel is going to have a really, really solid performance here. I think that the jabs and the right hands, the straight shots from Pichel, the movement, the good body kicks, I think he's going to end up in the over-under position up against the cage a lot with Austin Hubbard, but I don't think that Hubbard's submission game is going to be able to get much of anything done against a guy like Pichel, because if Jim Miller can't submit you and you can end up out-grappling Jim Miller the later the fight goes, and maintaining your top control, maintaining the top pressure, and out-positioning Jim Miller, I think he's going to give Hubbard a lot of problems on the ground. And overall, I just think Pichel gets this done here. I could see a finish later in the fight, maybe via just ground and pound, or, using that top heavy pressure from the half guard or the side control, working his way to mount and landing good heavy ground and pound shots. But overall, I think it's just going to be a signature performance here from Pichel. I think he's going to be able to use that grinding pace. He's going to push that pace for 15 minutes, get in the face of Hubbard. When it's at range, he's going to constantly keep landing that jab, land the right hand, boom, 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 pop, 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 and landing some good low kicks. He's got really, really solid low kicks to the calf. That's something that Hubbard is going to have to look out for. I do like Hubbard. I do think he's a good fighter, but I think he's outmatched here against Pichel. So I'm going to go with Vince from Hell Pichel to defeat Austin Hubbard via a 30-27 unanimous decision. Like I said, I think it's a signature performance from Pichel here, and I think he's just a little bit better everywhere the fight can take place than Hubbard. And you look at the odds, it's an even fight. You get a -110, -110, -108, -108. So it's a pick'em fight, but I think the odds should be more skewed in the favor of a guy like Vince Pichel, and I'm backing him heavily here to win this fight. Up next on the main card, you've got a battle in the heavyweight division where the big boys play. You've got the battle between Parker Porter, comes into this fight with a record of 10 victories and 6 defeats, going up against the Vanilla Gorilla Chase Sherman, who comes into this fight with a record of 15 wins and 7 losses. This is a good fight overall. I think it's a lot closer than people are giving Parker Porter credit for. A lot of the things that I've seen, I think a lot of people are backing Chase Sherman heavily here. And I see why. I definitely do see a reason to back Chase Sherman here. He's got a lot of power. He's got good volume. He's very fast. The speed is going to be a huge advantage for Chase Sherman in this fight. The speed and, the power, I think, is a little bit on the side of, I think the power is more on the side of Sherman when it comes to the boxing. And when it comes to the kicking and the Muay Thai, I think the power is more on the side of a Parker Porter, more in the low kicks and the kicks to the body. He's such a big guy. He's got huge legs for that heavyweight division, and he's not that fast. He's not that quick, but he is a technical striker, as is Chase Sherman. This is a very close fight. I'm kind of surprised this isn't a pick'em. Sherman's a heavy favorite in certain places, some having him at -200, some having him at -190, -185. He is a decent size favorite against Parker Porter, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that defensively speaking, Parker Porter is a lot better on the defense, landing punches and then, using his high guard, using those high blocks to slip and, block a lot of the punches coming at him. Volume has seemed to give Parker Porter a little bit of trouble, and against Chase Sherman, that's something you really don't want to have to deal with. The constant 1, 2, 3 knee. He's very good with that check left hook. Look for him to constantly try to step on the outside, land that check hook, then land the straight down the middle, check hook, straight, check hook, boom, 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 hook, cross, jab, knee, front kicks to the body, inside and outside low kicks. Definitely look for him to use that. But I think that the biggest weapon in this fight for a guy like Parker Porter is going to be fighting in that over-under clinch up against the cage, using his weight, grinding, head under the chin and just grinding on the chin of Chase Sherman, knees to the body, using his heavy frame and his strength to push Sherman up against the cage and just wear him out. And when it's at range, he's going to look to chop those low kicks. He's going to look to chop that leg to bits. I think that the inside and outside low kicks from a guy like Parker Porter, we saw Sherman have a lot of trouble with low kicks in his fight against Andrei Arlovsky. And the longer the fight played out, it led to him being stationary and more there to be hit with the shots up top. And I said Parker Porter's better defensively. We don't really see Chase Sherman move his head too much. He'll move his feet. He does have good speed, good combinations, good movement, but he doesn't move his head that much. And I think that the low kicks are going to set up the shots up top. He's going to work his way up, use that clinch to kind of tire out Chase Sherman, push him up against the cage. And I think that it's going to land. He's just going to be able to outgrind Chase Sherman here. And I think eventually he'll land a shot up top with his heavy power. And after Chase is very, stationary from the low kicks and the knees and everything like that. So my pick is Parker Porter to defeat Chase Sherman via a 29-28 split decision. I could see maybe a second round TKO. Maybe he lands a lot of good low kicks and then just ends up landing a good overhand on Sherman, dropping him and knocking him out. He does have good switch stances. Parker Porter is a really, really good technical striker, and I think that's something we're going to see here. And I'm going to go with a 29-28 split decision for Parker Porter over Chase Sherman. He's coming into this fight at the plus, let's see, what are the odds? Plus 165, plus 160, somewhere around there. So I'm going with the underdog in Parker Porter over Chase Sherman via 29-28 split decision. And now let's move to the co-main event of the evening. In the UFC's 155-pound lightweight division, you've got a battle between the longtime veteran, former lightweight contender, former featherweight standout in Clay the Carpenter Guida, going up against newcomer, undefeated, the Olympian Mark O'Madsen. This is a good fight, honestly. And, let's just take a look at Clay Guida for a second. You look at Guida's last fight against Michael Johnson, and a lot of people didn't believe that he was going to be able to handle a guy like Michael Johnson just because of his speed and his power. They thought that Johnson was going to be too much for him, was going to land too heavy on him, and, just eventually catch him and, just be too much for the older competitor, the veteran in Clay the Carpenter Guida. But what you saw from that is he was able to land some good shots on the feet. He was able to keep up a consistent pace. He was able to continue to move around and land good combinations on Johnson, not really get caught with too much, and use his wrestling and control up against the cage to just overwork, tire out, and get that lactic acid building in the muscles of Michael Johnson and cruising his way to a decision. That was a fight that really surprised me. I had Johnson heavily in that fight, and I don't believe I'll ever be able to back him again in his mixed martial arts career after that loss, just because, Guida's a guy who he has a lot of wins, 36 wins and 20 losses. He's been there. He's been in the game for a long time. He's been defeated, but he's come back and won some really, really close fights and had some really good performances overall. And let's just look at some of his fights recently. His last fight, like I said, he beat Michael Johnson via decision. That was at UFC Fight Night Overeem versus Volkov. Before that, he lost to Bobby Green via decision. Before that, he lost to Jim Miller by submission. He beat BJ Penn by decision. He lost to Charles Oliveira by submission. He knocked out Joe Lozon. He beat Eric Koch. He got knocked out by Brian Ortega. He lost to Thiago Tavares via submission. He beat Robbie Peralta via decision. That's just going back all the way to 2015. So Guida's in there. Guida's got cardio. He's got pace. And that's really his main weapon. It's his reckless. It's not really his recklessness. It's just his wildness. He's a wild man. That's what Joe Rogan always called Clay Guida. He comes forward. He moves his head, bobs and weaves left to right. Constantly is moving left and right, moving around. Boom, 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 boom. And then he'll eventually land a few punches, land some kicks. He's always moving. He doesn't stop moving. It's just constantly faking and feinting and circling and, in and out movement. And he constantly does that to overwhelm the opponent, not allow them to get into a rhythm. And then he can set his pace by just being this crazy wild man, landing a few good combinations, using his punches to set up his clinch entries in the over-unders or the double-under position, and then use the head on the inside or head on the outside single or the double leg, and then work his ground and pound in his top control. The problem is going up against an undefeated silver medalist in the Olympics and an Olympian in Marco Madsen. That pace and pressure is going to work if Guida can survive the top pressure of Marco Madsen, can survive the ground and pound, can survive just being overwhelmed on the ground, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, Guida's going to get taken down. He's going to get thrown around. He's going to get overwhelmed. But can he survive? Guida's been submitted before. He's been knocked out. I would look for Marco Madsen to immediately, as Guida starts moving around, shoot a double, get to the body lock if he can't get the takedown, and then just use some suplexes, use some throws, use some, high crotch throws. He's a Greco-Roman wrestler, so a lot of that is throws and suplexes and lateral drops and body locks, and a lot of stuff is done from that body lock position, whether it's trips, throws, and stuff like that. And he's going to be able to get Guida down. The question is, can Guida survive, weather the storm, and get back up to the feet? And honestly, I think Marco Madsen's just too strong. I think he's too powerful. We've seen some of his ground and pound in the past. I mean, he's got heavy punches from that top position. He doesn't give you any space. If he does, the minute you get back up, he's right back up on your hips, right back up in that body lock, and he's dragging you one way, throwing you over to the side with the suplex in the body lock, and taking you the other way for a ride with the body lock. And he's just going to overwhelm Guida here. Now, here's the thing. If it gets past the midway point of the second round and into the third round, Marco Madsen is a big, thick, muscular guy. And if it gets into that third round, if Guida can maintain his composure and keep up his pace and not get tired out, not get discouraged from the constant takedowns, the ground and pound, and the top pressure of Marco Madsen, he can win that third round. We saw in the fight against Austin Hubbard, Marco Madsen drastically fell off in that third round. He still went for takedowns even when he was tired. He didn't stop going for takedowns. He got one. Hubbard got back to his feet, tried again. He didn't get the second one. But, usually if a Madsen shoots in on you, you're going for a ride. And in this fight against Guida, I think in the third round, if the first two rounds aren't, a whitewash or a landslide victory for Marco Madsen, Guida can possibly steal that third round and maybe make the decision competitive, steal the second half of the second round, and then work in the third round and just overwhelm Marco Madsen. I don't see him finishing him, even though he does get really tired, so maybe Guida can put some combinations together and finish Marco Madsen, but I don't think he's going to be able to do that. He's not really much of a finisher. He's more of a grinder, a decision fighter, that old school mentality of, grind, rise and grind. And I think Marco Madsen's going to be able to get a hold of Guida, take him down, get in that half guard position, land some good ground and pound, and take him out in the first round. I'm going to go with Marco Madsen to defeat Clay Guida. I think he's going to get in that top position, probably get in that half guard, posture up, land some vicious ground and pound, get Guida to kind of turtle up. He'll expose his neck. Marco Madsen will jump on the neck with a guillotine and get the tap. So I'm going to go with the Olympian Marco Madsen to get the victory via a first round submission. And if you guys were wondering what the odds were for that co-main event, when you look at the betting lines, Marco Madsen is sitting at a minus 160, minus 175 favorite, and Clay Guida comes back around the plus 130, plus 145 betting line as an underdog. Guida's not a bad bet as the underdog, but I would ride with Marco Madsen if you're going to bet on this fight. I just think he's younger, he's undefeated, he's the bigger, stronger guy, and he's going to be able to use his size and pressure to top pressure, so to speak, to beat down the veteran in Guida. So I would side with Marco Madsen at around a minus 160, minus 175. All right, now we get to the moment that everybody has been waiting for, the main event of the evening, a battle between top contenders in the UFC's 185-pound middleweight division. You've got a battle between the number 3 ranked, the Killer Gorilla Jared Cannonier, versus the number 9 ranked former middleweight title challenger, Kelvin Gastelum. When you look at the records for each fighter, Jared Cannonier comes into this fight with a record of 13 victories and 5 defeats. And Kelvin Gastelum comes back with a record of 16 victories and 7 losses. This is a tough fight. It's a really tough fight to call because you look at each of their last fight. They're both coming off losses to the former champion and the current number 1 contender in that 185-pound division in Robert the Reaper Whittaker. So you look at each person's, performance against Whittaker. Gastelum fought him in a 5-round main event, and Cannonier fought him in a 3-round fight at UFC 254. So when it comes down to who had the better performance against Whittaker, I would definitely say Cannonier, even though it was a 3-round compared to a 5-round fight, 15 minutes compared to 25 for KG, Kelvin Gastelum. I do think that Cannonier had the better performance. He was able to slip a lot more of the shots of Whittaker. He was able to slip inside, slip outside, roll underneath, get on the inside, get on the outside, use his low kicks to his advantage, really kind of try to cut off Whittaker. He did lose the fight. I think it was a pretty clear-cut decision for the former champion in Whittaker, but he did have a better performance. Kelvin had some good moments. He hurt him at one point in the fight, but overall got dominated on the feet. He got countered and beat to the punch during the combinations, and got taken down and out-wrestled by the champion in Whittaker, and Whittaker actually took his back and was able to control him with those hooks, and that's one of the first times we've seen Whittaker use his jiu-jitsu and his wrestling game in a really long time, and to use it against a former, amateur wrestler, and a good one at that, in Kelvin Gastelum, goes to say a lot for him. And I guess let's start off by looking at the stats for this fight. So Cannonier is ranked number 3 at 185 pounds, and Gastelum is currently ranked number 9 in that division. When you look at the overall stats, it's a 2-inch height advantage for the Killer Gorilla Jared Cannonier, 5'11" to 5'9" for Kelvin Gastelum. Weight, 185 pounds, obviously. Reach, it's going to be a 6-inch reach advantage for the number 3 ranked Jared Cannonier, a 77.5-inch reach compared to a 71.5-inch reach for Kelvin Gastelum. When you look at the leg reach, it's a 41.5-inch leg reach for Cannonier compared to a 39.5-inch leg reach for Kelvin Gastelum. So it's around a 2-inch leg reach advantage and a 6-inch reach advantage. He's going to be the longer, rangier fighter, and he's going to want to keep it at that range, but not stay too far outside of the range, because you don't want Kelvin to be able to step in and get that fully extended left hand or check right hook into the left overhand / straight on your chin, because that's a bad night for anybody when KG cracks you. When you look at win percentages, 69% of the wins coming by way of knockout for Cannonier, to 41% of wins coming by way of KO for Gastelum. When you look at the submission average, 15% of wins coming by way of submission for Cannonier to 24 for Kelvin Gastelum, and 15% of the wins coming by way of decision for Cannonier compared to 35% via decision for Gastelum. So comparing the two in terms of who's the better finisher, Cannonier is definitely the better finisher with an overall 84% finish rate. So that's saying a lot, and Gastelum's a good finisher. Gastelum has that knockout power. He's got good boxing combinations, good lateral movement, good in and out movement. He's even got some sneaky left high kicks. We saw him land some on Israel Adesanya, and that is something that Cannonier is going to have to look out for, whether he's in southpaw or orthodox, because we do see Cannonier as somebody I would equate to being a stance switch fighter or a switch stance fighter. He will start in orthodox, and usually he will go back to orthodox to do his best work, but switching to southpaw, he lands a good power left kick to the legs on the inside or outside of the legs. And he has a good left body kick, good left high kick, good kicks from the right as well. I think that's an area of Cannonier's game that's really heavily underrated, is his kicking game to the legs and to the body. So overall, we'll continue with the stats. Overall fight time, average fight time for Cannonier is 8 minutes and 28 seconds compared to 12 minutes and 18 seconds for Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum has had the experience in the 5-round fights, more experience in the 5-rounders. He's gone to war with the current champion, the reigning defending Israel, the last stylebender, Adesanya. Had a great fight with him at UFC 236. If you have not seen that, definitely go out of your way to check that out. Cannonier, he's more to get in there, finish you off, and get out. Around a 1.5, 2-round fight usually for Cannonier, to almost always being close to a 3-rounder for Kelvin Gastelum in terms of average fight time. When you look at the knockdown averages per a 15-minute fight, 0.59 for the Killer Gorilla Jared Cannonier to a 0.61 for Kelvin Gastelum. So even though it's a shorter average fight time for Cannonier, as we stated, Gastelum has been in there with the best of the best. He's been in there with Robert Whittaker. He's been in there with Israel Adesanya. He's been in there with Jack Hermanson. He's been in there with Michael Bisping. He's been in there with some of the best at 185 pounds. And, normally he's booked for 5-rounders, booked for, main events, or, in the case again with the Adesanya fight, in an interim middleweight championship fight. He was supposed to battle Robert Whittaker at UFC 234 before that Adesanya fight took place, and that's why it was for the interim, because Whittaker got injured. So he was supposed to battle for the undisputed middleweight crown at UFC 234 in Melbourne, but that did not take place. Let's continue down the line with the stats. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. When it comes to more breaking down the stats, significant strikes landed per minute, 3.62 for Jared Cannonier to 3.64 for Kelvin Gastelum. A 51% significant strike accuracy rate for Cannonier compared to a 43% accuracy rate for Kelvin Gastelum. So slightly less accurate, or slightly less active with strikes landed per minute for Cannonier, but a decent size advantage in terms of accuracy with the strikes that he throws. And strikes absorbed per minute, Cannonier is better defensively than is Kelvin Gastelum. 2.76 strikes absorbed per minute compared to 2.92 for Kelvin Gastelum. When it comes to overall defense, like we said, Cannonier is better defensively. He keeps his guard up. He uses a lot of slips, pivots, rolls underneath a lot of the shots. With 67% significant strike defense compared to a 59% defense rate for Gastelum. So Gastelum does have a good defense. When it comes to the grappling, takedown average per 15-minute fight, 0.2 for Cannonier to 1.22 for Gastelum. So Gastelum will rely a little bit more on his wrestling. He does come from a wrestling background. If he needs to, he can find a way to get the fight to the ground, get in on the hips, and shoot the takedowns. When it comes to takedown accuracy, 33% for Cannonier, even though he doesn't shoot his takedowns, he's also not accurate with them, to a 39% accuracy rate for the more active wrestler in Kelvin Gastelum. When it comes to the takedown defense, 44% for Cannonier to a 64% takedown defense for Kelvin Gastelum. I think that 64% is a little bit, it's a little bit tricky, because you look at Gastelum and, I know he does stuff some takedowns, but, Whittaker was able to get him down multiple times. There have been people who can take down Gastelum. I mean, obviously Chris Weidman's a decorated, All-American wrestler, and Whittaker's a great grappler and a great jiu-jitsu artist, but not necessarily known as a wrestler, but he's got really good defense, and he was able to get some body lock trip takedowns as Gastelum overextended on a punch and, just overextended his upper half. Whittaker was able to time it, step in, get the body lock, and get the trip on the circle towards the trip side and get the takedown. But when it comes down to looking at the fight, Cannonier is a little bit more patient. He's a little bit more reserved, a little bit more relaxed and calm and stoic. in his fight approach. He does primarily fight out of the orthodox stance, but he will switch back and forth from orthodox to southpaw. Sometimes he'll stay in southpaw for a little bit longer, circle, switch orthodox. He'll throw kicks and switch stances off those kicks that he throws, whether it's throwing a right kick and stepping down into southpaw or throwing a left kick and stepping down into orthodox off of that little slight angle, step and circle off to your lead or rear side. He is a little bit tricky to get a read on because, as we said, he is a switch stance fighter. Fights out of orthodox, fights out of southpaw, moves laterally, moves in and out. He doesn't move too much, though. That's the thing. Gastelum is a guy who moves really, really well in and out, but lateral movement, he's not so good at. Yes, he can get on his bicycle and move around, but it's more just staying on light on the feet, moving in and out, boom, boom, boom. Stepping in, stepping out, stepping in, stepping out, stepping in, stepping out, blah, 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 step in. You look at the fight against Bisping. Bisping was able to land some good shots, land some good kicks early on. I know the fight was very quick and ended in the first round, but Bisping Gastelum stepped in, boom, Bisping tried to counter 1-2. Gastelum pulled back and came over the top with that straight left and knocked Michael Bisping out cold, who was the former middleweight champion. And, he was supposed to fight Anderson Silva at that point, but, Bisping stepped in on short notice after losing his title to George St. Pierre at UFC 217 back in November. And, he's really good at that pull counter too, whether it's a straight left or an overhand left. He likes to set it up with that right hook. So if he's fighting an orthodox fighter, when you see Cannonier staying in that orthodox stance, he's going to try to jab, fake, use that right hook, and then use that right hook to get the range, get the distance, and boom, come over the top with the overhand left. If he lands that overhand left clean on the chin of Cannonier, it could be an early night. He could land that overhand left and knock Cannonier out. I mean, I could definitely see that happening. When I look at Cannonier, I think Cannonier can win by just being economical, by using his better defense. The thing with Gastelum is, even though he's got good boxing, good in and out movement, he has almost no head movement. Every once in a while, you'll see him slip off the center line and move his head. But 9 out of 10 times, he likes to reach in front of him to try to parry down a lot of the strikes, get control of the hands, or just control the range so he can stay out of the way of the shots and then probably counter with a jab, which can then set up the jab to the left, to the right hook, to the overhand left. That's something that Cannonier, I don't think, is going to allow Gastelum to do. And whenever he does reach out in front of him, he's going to get poked with the jab. He's going to get poked with the jab, going to get poked with the 1-2, going to get poked with the left hook, going to get switched back to southpaw, boom, land the straight left, right hook. Every time he reaches out, look for Cannonier to counter with that jab down the center and the hook. Gastelum doesn't really use his jab too much. We've seen it from him in the past. He can use it, but a lot of that lead hand is coming off of that lead hook, the right hook, just to find a range to open up for that overhand left. And he's got power. He's got good boxing. He's got good combinations. We saw it against Tim Kennedy in their fight back in the day. Just boom, 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 right, left overhand, right hook, left overhand, boom, boom, 1-2, boom. When he lands those combinations, if he lands that left hand, it's nighty-night. And like we said, against Israel Adesanya, that was a back and forth war. They both hurt each other. He's really good when he gets the opponent's back up against the cage. I think that is an area that Gastelum's going to look to employ, is pushing Cannonier back, getting his back up against the fence, trying to work in the clinch positions. And then as he tries to circle off the cage, that's when Gastelum's going to try to use that right hook, get that little brief angle off to his left power side, and try to set up that linear angle to land the overhand left off up against the cage. Because Cannonier can't back up, he's going to have to circle. So as he circles away from the left, he catches him with the right hook and comes over the top with the overhand left. Kind of like a Conor McGregor, like he did against Chad Mendes or Diego Brandao, if you go back and watch those fights. Overall, I think that if there's wrestling employed in this fight, it's going to be against Cannonier, or it's going to be from the side of Gastelum. If there's a lot of clinch work up against the cage, it's going to be Cannonier trying to use his strength, his power, and his overall just size advantage and strength advantage against Gastelum, because we've seen that some people have been able to outpower, outmaneuver, and just overall use their strength against Gastelum, because he is a smaller 185er. He could make 170, I believe, if he really, really got his diet down, but he's doing very well at 185. Obviously, we talked about the Whitaker fights already. One of the biggest weapons for Cannonier, I believe, is going to be his leg kicks. When they're both in southpaw, chop that outside right lead leg of Gastelum. He got hit a lot with low kicks from Darren Till, and that was kind of setting up the entire fight for Till to win against Gastelum in his middleweight debut at UFC 244. Look for him to chop that outside low kick, chop the inside kick when he switches to orthodox. Look for the outside kick to use the jab, lead hook, outside low kick. He's very good at slipping off the center, landing the right hand, slipping off the center, landing the straight left, rolling underneath, and very just defensively aware. I think his defense is going to be the key for Cannonier here. Because yes, Gastelum is good at pulling away from shots. He's good at slipping off the center line sometimes, using his movement to move away. But his head movement is kind of non-existent. It's not that great. Cannonier has much better defense. He's more aware. He's not as reckless on the feet. He's always got his hands up pretty high. He's always slipping, roll, slip, roll, slip, pivot, roll, and getting away from the shots and then coming back on the counter. Against David Branch, he was able to slip one of the shots, get on the outside angle, and then as Branch turned back into him, boom, he landed that overhand right. I think the angles and the overall defensive awareness of Cannonier, along with the heavy kicks to the inside and outside of the leg and the body kicks, look for Cannonier to constantly switch between southpaw and orthodox, just so it's a little bit harder for Gastelum to get a read on what stance he's going to be in, and it'll get him to overextend on his punches, which can lead to Cannonier getting an angle, slipping off the center line of that punch, and then coming back in with the 1-2, coming back in with the 3-2, coming back in with the 1-2 uppercut. I think Cannonier might be looking to set up, use a lot of fakes and feints. He used them against Whitaker pretty well, fake, boom, 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 land that uppercut. He did it against Jack Hermansson, timed the takedowns and got the uppercuts. If Gastelum shoots, I think it's going to be from the body lock because, the head position is a lot less susceptible to getting caught on with an uppercut on the way in. So I think he's going to look to get to that body lock and use takedowns from there. But even if Gastelum does get the takedowns on Jared Cannonier, I think Cannonier he's good defensively on the ground. We saw against Jack Hermansson, almost in trouble, was able to sink his hip down to the ground, turn into Jack Hermansson, and then work his way back up to the feet. So it's a dangerous fight for both guys. Like I said, if Gastelum lands that overhand left on the counter, if he slips the 1-2 of Cannonier and comes back with his own counter 3-2, slip the 2, come back with the 1-2, pull 2, 1-2, pull 2. He's very good at the pull combinations, pulling back, slipping out of the range, and then coming back with that overhand left or the straight left. If he lands that on the chin of Cannonier, yes, I know he's a former heavyweight, a former light heavyweight, making his way all the way down to 185 after he finally got his weight cut together, and he's just shredded at 185. But that strength and that power from heavyweight and light heavyweight is going to carry down, and it has carried down to middleweight. He's a lot more defensively aware than Gastelum, and I think this is a signature performance from Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier. I'm going to go with a decision. I want to say he can get a knockout. I think this is the hardest puncher that Gastelum has faced in his entire career. Dropping down from 2 weight classes above and landing that overhand and just landing those power shots. When he lands on you and his ground and pound from the top position, like we saw against Jack Hermansson, if he knocks you down and gets in that top position, or maybe he ends up on the top position in a scramble against Kelvin, because we said Kelvin has had the tendency to get out wrestled in his MMA career, that ground and pound is going to hurt him, and I think he can get the finish. But Gastelum's so durable; he's never been knocked out, never been finished, by knockout before or TKO. So I'm going to go with a decision. I think it's a 49-46. You know what? No, I'll give Gastelum a little bit more credit than that. I think it's a 48-47, 3 rounds to 2, unanimous decision victory for the number 3 ranked Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier. He wins here. He might get the winner of Darren Till and Derek Brunson, as they're about to fight in next month. So look out for that fight, and then he can get the winner. If not, he can get Adesanya next. But I believe Whitaker's going to get Adesanya, and that's not going to be till 2022, as they stated. So unless Adesanya wants to stay active and not wait for Whitaker, or vice versa, I could see Cannonier fighting the winner of Brunson and Darren Till. But I'm going with the number 3 ranked Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier to defeat the number 9 ranked Kelvin Gastelum via a 48-47 unanimous decision. Let's look at the fight odds for this fight. It's pretty close. Cannonier is a -144, between a -140 and a -160 favorite, compared to the +120 like plus 125 to plus 130 underdog for Gastelum. So a lot of these fights are very, very close on the betting lines. There's not really any huge favorites or huge underdogs. All these fights are neck and neck, close fights. But I got to go with the Killer Gorilla, Jared Cannonier, to win via 48-47 unanimous decision. All right, guys, those are my picks for UFC Fight Night. UFC Vegas 34, I believe. I believe this is UFC Vegas 34. Cannonier versus Gastelum. And I hope you enjoyed my picks. I hope you liked my breakdown and my analysis. I really enjoyed breaking down these fights for you. I know they're coming out pretty late because the fights are just in a few short hours, taking place tonight. But if you like this podcast, if you like the Touch 'em Up podcast and you like what we do over here, definitely leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Listen to the podcast on any platform. That's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, Breaker, Overcast, and many, many more. Anywhere you can get your audio podcasts, you can get the Touch 'em Up podcast. You can feel free to donate, become a paid listener of the channel, become a paid listener of the podcast. The more people that support, the more people that tune in every week, the quicker we can grow and the quicker I can become one of the best MMA and professional wrestling analysts and reporters in the game. Thank you guys for all the support. I really, really do appreciate it. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out. Have a good night, everybody. All right.